Tonight, we are doing the name of God that means, let me put my phone on Do Not Disturb, that means consuming fire. I cannot say the word to save my life. I'm going to try. You won't hear it often, but I believe it's Aish Akla. Did I say it? Did I say it right? You didn't hear it. I can't do it again. Okay, so it means consuming fire. And if I said it the way that I read it, it sounds like I say bad words. So we're just not, I'm going to try to really say it the way that Pastor Chris's computer said it, and we're just going to go with it, okay? But it is consuming fire, all right? So I love fire, which is, I know, like, that's a weird thing, but I love watching things burn. I think fire is pretty. And out of the 6 high schools that I went to, I graduated from Pickens, and their mascot is the blue flame, which is the hottest part of the fire. I got to set a field on fire one time, a controlled fire, and that was like the funnest thing I ever did in my life. So I was like, this is great. So I think coming to the fire of the Lord is the best thing for me to do. So, amen for that. Fire, the consuming fire. Perfect fire, like I had mentioned the other Sunday, it has no smoke, which I think is pretty cool when you start looking at different stories in the Bible and when it mentions fire. Perfect fire has no smoke because it's complete combustion. When there's smoke in a fire, it means that there is a lack of oxygen. Adequate oxygen feeds the fire, allowing it to be hot enough to not smoke. When a fire smokes, it could be contributed from air pollution as well. So fire consumes, fire purifies. When there's smoke, there's evidence of a lack of oxygen and moisture and impurities in and around the fire. So when God is the consuming fire, there's no smoke, because his spirit is the ruach, the wind and air, perfect oxygen, enough oxygen, a purifying God that cleans up everything in sight, no impurities, just his all-consuming fire. And the first place that this is mentioned is in Deuteronomy 4. So that's where we're going to go tonight. All right. I promise I'm not nervous. My heart is just like, it's going crazy. And it's like shaking. All right. Deuteronomy 4, 15 through 24. We're going to start. It says, "Therefore, watch yourselves very carefully, since you saw no form on the day that the Lord spoke to you at Oreb, out of the midst of the fire. Beware lest you act corruptly by making a carved image for yourselves in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the air, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the water under the earth. And beware lest you raise your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, you be drawn away and bow down to them and serve them, things that the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be a people of his own inheritance, as you are this day. Furthermore, the Lord was angry with me because of you, and he swore that I should not cross the Jordan, and that I should not enter the good land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance. For I must die in this land. I must not go over the Jordan, but you shall go over and take possession of that good land. Take care, lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make a carved image, the form of anything that the Lord your God has forbidden you." Here it is. "For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. Moses was telling the people that he was going to die and not be walking into the promised land with them. But he tells them to remember the Lord, that the Lord is a consuming fire, a jealous God. And it's beautiful that he was telling them that the Lord had brought them out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt. And although that was a fire they didn't want to be a part of, to remember that God is a fire that you want to cling to. God is a fire of deliverance, but God is a fire of closeness and jealousy. Our behavior doesn't change the fire of God. He's all-consuming in the best possible ways. Although this was the first time Moses called God Esh Akel, it wasn't the first time of knowing God as the consuming fire. If you go back to Exodus 3, we see a bush burning but not consumed. And it's funny because, to me anyways, the word burning in that passage means consumed, but the word consumed in that passage is to burn up or devour. So the bush was on fire but wasn't turning to ash. It wasn't being burned up, but it was devoured or consumed by the fire of God. So here Moses is in Deuteronomy, knowing that a turning point encounter with God in his life was at that burning bush. He saw God as fire, as he leaves some of his last remarks to the people of God and how he was to the people of how God was and is a consuming fire. Moses learned over the course of his life the kind of fire God really was. God was the fire that called Moses in Exodus 3. God was the fire that led them out of Egypt in Exodus 13. God was the fire on the mountain in Exodus 24. Moses knew God as the consuming fire. Moses knew God as the just and jealous God. Moses knew God as one who doesn't blow smoke, but is pure and righteous in all he commands and speaks. There was never any impurities or smoke that ever came from God. The fire at the burning bush didn't have smoke. But what God consumes, what God commands, and what God decrees is a fire that doesn't just come at a bush or a mountain. It's one that burns on the inside of you to face the fires that come at you from the world. There was a knowing in Moses. Moses knew the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because when God came to him at the bush, God told him that he was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses knew of how God supplied the ram for Abraham when he went to sacrifice Isaac. Moses knew of how God sent fire and brimstone to Sodom and Gomorrah. Moses knew how God provided and brought Joseph to Egypt in the first place. Moses knew how his mom sent him down the Nile River to save his life, of how God kept him safe. There was a fire, a longing kindled in him long before he turned to see the burning bush. As Moses tells the people that God is a consuming fire, it's not just a memory, it's not just a story, it's a prophecy, it's an urgency, it's a knowing that he isn't going to step into what he worked so hard to bring them to. It's a knowing that if they don't obey, they will learn of God as a consuming fire in a way that brings judgment, not just a burning. And there's another story in the Bible that I think pulls on how God is a consuming fire. If you go to Daniel 3, it tells of how King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue, and I know most of us know this story, but had made a gold statue for everyone to bow down to and worship when music was played. But there were 3 who refused. So I am going to read because I think you need the full picture. And y'all know I like scripture. So I'm going to go to Daniel 3, starting at verse 13. And I did think about reading the whole chapter to you, so you're welcome. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now if you are ready, when you hear the sound of all the music, every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well then good, that'll be fine. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning, fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning, fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. I love the boldness. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men fell bound into the fiery furnace. Verse 24, then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? They answered and said to the king, true, O king. He answered and said, but I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Ooh, you could go somewhere with that. Come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over their bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. The fire of the Hebrew boys, the fire that they were in, was a fire that Nebuchadnezzar thought he would prove his authority by. Thought he would show the people that they will obey or be consumed by his fire. But when they came out, they didn't even smell of fire. Nothing was singed. They might have been in a fire that the enemy put them in, but when the consuming fire of God showed up, there was no smoke, no burning of what God was covering, only the burning of what had those 3 bound. God's perfect fire is what consumed them. His perfect fire is why they didn't smell of Nebuchadnezzar's fire. The consuming fire was the fire those Hebrew boys were actually in, the consuming fire of God. When we are engulfed with the consuming fire of God, no fire the enemy throws at you or throws you in can burn you up. They weren't in the enemy's fire. They were consumed by the consuming fire of God. And their lives represented what it meant to be refined by the fire long before they were ever thrown into the fire. They understood who God was. They understood who they served. They understood who their souls loved. And they knew that no fire could harm them when they were engulfed with the all-consuming fire of God. They knew God as the deliverer. They knew God as the one who exiled them, but as one who loved them. They knew God as one who would rescue them. They knew God as one that would come running after his bride. They were consumed. Fire doesn't just show up. Fire burns. It's kindled. It stays as long as there is enough oxygen to keep it burning. They breathed God in every day. They were engulfed with him. They didn't just have a life that spoke of the fire. They knew of the purity of him. They knew what it took to have a life postured towards him. Even with Jeremiah. Jeremiah was beat and put into stocks, and it was around the same time because their stories overlap. And he was told not to prophesy any longer. But Jeremiah spoke in verse 9 of chapter 20. It says, if I say I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, there is in my heart, as it were, a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I am weary with holding it in, and I cannot. God and his words were burning on the inside of him, just like they were with the Hebrew boys, so much so that he couldn't hold it in. But that fire didn't start there. That fire started when he was called. That fire started when he was commissioned in the relationship that he was growing in with God. When we are consumed by God in every aspect, we are also consumed with him, with the fire of him. He burns in us. He pours out of us. He's the oxygen that keeps us going, the oxygen we breathe, but the oxygen that feeds the fire. I lived with my grandparents for a while when I was a teenager, off and on throughout life. And we had two wood-burning stoves. That's how the house was heated in the winter. So if your door was closed in your bedroom, you froze. So you better keep it open or you weren't going to have any heat. And I split wood every day. I love splitting wood just as much as I love watching fire burn. So we know that I have issues, and that's okay. So I loved splitting wood. We had to do it every day and stack it. I didn't like stacking it so much, so I kind of chunked it at my sister, but I would split it because she couldn't. She couldn't split it, and I could, and I loved it. But my grandpa, we always kept wood for the stoves, and my grandpa always kept the kindling. And you could hear him in the middle of the night getting up, stirring the fire, making sure it had oxygen, stirring the fire, and ripping newspapers or whatever he had to make sure that the fire kept going. My grandpa, no matter how tired, no matter how sore, no matter how good of sleep he was getting, he made sure that the fire never burnt out. In Leviticus 6, but you know why? It's harder to start a fire than to keep a fire burning. It is. I would rather put in the work to keep a fire burning than to continuously have to start over and over and over again. And in Leviticus 6, it tells of how the fire on the altar must never be burnt out, how the priest had to make sure it stayed burning always. When we are aware of God as the consuming fire, we will understand how that fire should never be put out or smothered. It's the fire that keeps us. It's the fire that delivers us. It's the fire that saves us, just like those Hebrew boys. It was God's fire that they were consumed with. It was God's fire that Jeremiah was burning up with. It's his fire that must always be kept burning, that should never be smothered or stifled. The fire is needed not just for us, but against the enemy. And there's a story about fire with Paul and how a snake bit him. I think I preached this one youth service night a long time ago, but how a snake bit him, and the fire that drew out the snake is the same fire that is what killed the snake. When the Hebrew boys were thrown in the fire, even though it was the enemy's fire, the ones that threw them in were killed by that fire. Those mighty men of Nebuchadnezzar's. Nebuchadnezzar was enraged by the fire those boys were carrying on the inside of them before he ordered them to be thrown in his furnace. The fire that drew out the snake that bit Paul is just like that. The enemy is enraged by the fire that burns within us. He is enraged by the consuming fire that we carry. So he comes out slithering like a snake, drawn out by the fire that is engulfing us, lashes out, but then is killed if we do it accurately and shake him off accurately, is killed by the fire that drew him. Just like so many of us, so many of you, you may feel like you're getting closer and closer to God and truly going after him, and then here comes a diagnosis, here comes a trial. Here comes your child acting crazy. Here comes another bump in the road, and it's the snake trying to see how he can creep his way in, how he can latch his teeth into you. But because of the all-consuming fire that we carry that's within us, we can shake the enemy off and throw him in the fire that drew him out. Because God doesn't just consume us, he devours our enemies. The fire of God, this all-consuming fire, is more than a guard. It's more than a purifier, more than a refiner. He's a filler. And if you switch to the New Testament, another story that we all know so well in the upper room in Acts 2, it says, when the day of Pentecost arrived, they were all together in one place, and suddenly there came from heaven a sound like a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting, and divided tongues as of fire appeared to them and rested on each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. This fire was like the fire Jeremiah had. This fire was the consuming fire of God that rested on them and filled them. No longer could they sit idly by, but they began to speak, prophesy, and to preach. Pentecost didn't die. The consuming fire wasn't just for Moses to speak of before he died. The fire didn't just lead them through a wilderness. The fire didn't just lead them out of Egypt. The fire didn't just consume the ropes around the Hebrew boys. The fire didn't just burn within Jeremiah. The fire didn't just lay on those in the upper room. The fire is here now. The fire that can walk you through your wilderness now. The fire can lead you out of your bondage now. The fire can burn up everything that doesn't need to be in your life now. The fire can lay and rest on you now. The God of consuming fire wasn't just for them, but it's for you now. That's why in Hebrews 12, it tells of the mountain that the people were scared to death to touch. It's talking about the children of Israel, of the God of consuming fire. But it says we aren't at that mountain. We're at Zion. Listen to this starting at verse 18 in Hebrews 12. It says, for you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire of darkness and gloom and a tempest. And you know, they could have been just like Moses. They could have wanted to draw closer to God. They could have yearned to go up there because Joshua was on that mountain with Moses. Joshua learned, and the people were scared of the consuming fire of God back then, so they were not allowed to touch it. They refused to be pure. They refused to purify their lives, and they couldn't touch it. Let me keep going. Okay, and the sound of a trumpet and a voice whose words were made the hearers beg that no further messages be spoken to them, for they could not endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. We're able to touch the consuming fire of God because the veil was torn because of what Jesus did on the cross. Verse 25, it says, see that you do not refuse him who is speaking. For if they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less will we escape if we reject him who warns from heaven. At that time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. This phrase, yet once more, indicates the removal of things that are shaken. That is, things that have been made in order that the things that cannot be shaken may remain. Verse 28, therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. Our God is a consuming fire. The fire is for you now. We should not be those people who are scared to get near the fire. We should be those people that run to the fire, that runs to the burning away of things, that runs to the purity of life, that runs to the refining of the fire, because God will shake what can be shaken. But if we are already consumed by the all-consuming fire, when craziness comes, when diagnosis comes, when your health fails, we will not be moved, because we have been forged in the fire. No fire that the enemy throws at you can consume you when you're already consumed by the consuming fire of God. No bondage the enemy tries to wrap around you can stay, because when you are consumed by the consuming fire of God, he burns up every rope and everything that has you bound. No darkness that you are engulfed with can ever keep you in the dark, because the consuming fire of God is the light that will lead you out. This fire can be yours. This identity of God can be one that you know. His fire is here, not just Sundays, not just when the right worship song is playing, but here, now. No music, not an amazing speaker, just his words, his fire, his life, ready and willing to consume all of you. And that's what I want. I want to be absolutely consumed in the fire of God. I want his fire to lead me out through a wilderness when I'm in one. I want his fire to light the way when I'm in a dark place and let me follow it. I want his fire to be like Elijah when he prayed down the fire of God for the altar to get up the sacrifice of Baal, but also to get his. You know, like, who is the God? The God who, oh my gosh, my brain just went dead. The God who responds by fire is the God. And I know I misquoted that, but y'all know what I'm talking about. He's the God who answers by fire. The God who answers by fire is the one and only God. And God answered by fire. God lapped up the other sacrifice, and God consumed his, even the water. That's what I want. I want every piece of me, the impurities, to be consumed by the fire. I don't want to blow smoke. I don't want smoke in my life. If I'm blowing smoke, then that means there's impurities, and I'm just giving out hot air of Scripture, and I don't want that. I don't want my worship to be tarnished. I don't want smoke. Moses turned to the burning bush because he saw a bush burning, and there was no smoke. People are going to turn to the church. People are going to turn to you when they're not just seeing smoke come out of your ears or smoke coming out of your mouth or out of your worship. They're going to turn to you when they see a purity of the church, when they see a purity of people. Not that we have to be perfect, but we can be consumed by the all-consuming fire and burn with no smoke. Because when you start burning with smoke, nobody wants to see it. Everybody's going to get choked up. It smells bad. You smell bad. They'll smell bad. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that in a church. I want a church that is consumed by the all-consuming fire. I want a life that is consumed by the all-consuming fire. I want a life that is engulfed in him.